I want to introduce Rosemary. She's here on behalf of the Northeast India Archive. It is a public archive committed to preserving the oral traditions, cultural legacies, and audio-visual heritage of the region's diverse communities. By collecting film, photographs, audio recordings, and documents, it plays a crucial role in safeguarding indigenous storytelling, literature, and knowledge passed down through generations. Representing the archive is Rosemary with us, one of the founding members and dedicated archivist whose work bridges memory, media, and cultural preservation. She also serves as assistant professor at St. Anthony's College, Shillong, and was recently awarded a British Council Creative Economy Scholarship to pursue further studies in creative industries and cultural policy at the University of Glasgow, Scotland. I give you the time now.
Again, as I was saying, I first came to know about the Shirui Festival last year because I happened to be taking a few sessions of event management with undergraduate students of the college, and I gave them an assignment to tell me of an interesting festival that they have either heard of or that they have been to. And interestingly, there were quite a few of them who talked to me about the Shirui Festival. And coincidentally, I happened to get this invitation for the first Shirui Literature Festival, and it has been an absolute pleasure, therefore, to be here today. I come from the Northeast India AV Archive, that is the Northeast India Audiovisual Archive, and our sponsors are, we've worked on this with the help of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation in Japan. And we are actually, our Northeast India, the entire idea of coming up with the Northeast India Audiovisual Archive was so that we could be that one-stop, the repository of, that helps collect a lot of different stories, especially in the audiovisual format, digitize them and keep them in one location so that generations later they can actually go back to this whole repository and come to know about a lot of other audiovisual stories that exist in the northeast of India. Of course, since the time of our inception in 2019, we've found more than just audiovisual material, we've found other visual material as well, like photographs, etc. So today, if you go to our archive, you will get an opportunity to actually also sieve through a lot of photography content as well, other visual content as well. We are housed in St. Anthony's College, Shillong. So basically, we actually are from, it was the Department of Mass Media in St. Anthony's College, Shillong, that has actually opened this particular archive. And I feel that we were absolutely well positioned to actually start this archive at this particular point of time. That was towards the end of 2018 when we first started talking about it. And the reason behind that was because of the fact that, our college, St. Anthony's College, we happened to be one of the first colleges in the northeast of India, and our department, the Department of Mass Media, historically speaking, happens to be one of the first departments in the entire country to actually offer undergraduate studies, undergraduate course in media studies. And so that was from 1995 onwards, and we had with us a whole repository of material already, because we had collaborated with so many organizations, be it governmental organizations or non-governmental organizations. We organized the first Shillong International Photography Festival. We even came up with an India 8 regional festival, that the first edition of which was in 2013, and then we had a second one in 2023 under the flagship of the Northeast India AV Archive, of course. And we also collaborated with a lot of organizations to do a lot of different theatre projects. We also had so many students, so many future media personalities and professionals like filmmakers, photographers, journalists coming out from our institutions, actually walking in and out of the portals of our institution, and we felt that we were at the center in Shillong, connected to the rest of the Northeast. And we were just at a very crucial point wherein we had so much with us that it was time for us to start something like this, which is an archive that allows us for us to kind of be the starting point again, to help document as much as possible possible, whatever material that we can possibly find out there to keep it ready for future generations to resort to it. At the moment, of course, the slides before this showed us the offices which are kind of the present office for the archive, but there is a building that is being made, a new building, and there's a whole floor that is going to be dedicated to the archive, and I'm sure at that particular point of time I will probably be inviting Shirui, the Literature Festival as well, to come and see us in this new setup and all the other resource persons. This picture is really, the reason why I kept this picture here is this picture is really, really important for the making of the archive. This was way back in 2018. We had a whole series of talks with our funders and our collaborators, and this was after a successful series of conversations when we finally sat down and decided that, okay, we're going to start the archive. We did not know what the name of the archive was going to be. We are a group of about 10 to 11 members in the department. We were not even sure who we were going to select among us to lead the project. We didn't even know where we were going to put up all of this audiovisual material. How are we going to digitize this audiovisual material? But we already started off with it, and this picture actually documents that very precious moment when, after a series of successful meetings, we took this picture late in the evening. We have the program officer of Sasakawa Peace Foundation herself right at the center there, Yui Nakamura. Her colleague is right next to her, on the right, the lady right at the far end here. She is the festival director for the Yamagata International Documentary Film Festival, who also collaborated with us. And at the far end there, you have our research consultant, the late Tarun Bhartia. I think some of you may know him. He was an amazing filmmaker and photographer as well. So he was actually, our research consultant was actually our connecting point between us and the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. And here is, of course, the rest of the team, me there. I was holding the selfie, so I'm so sorry that I clicked a really bad selfie, but you can well imagine how tired we were in that particular time. So this is an important moment for us, and so I decided to put it here. That said, I want to tell you a little bit about my journey in archiving and why I was so interested in this particular subject. So the whole thing is that while I was studying theatre in the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama in the University of London, I had the opportunity to choose from a plethora of elective subjects, but I was specifically interested in choosing the subject on archiving practices. The reason behind that was because I wanted to know about the art of documenting other theatre performances, of course, but I was most importantly interested in documenting my own work in theatre, and not just the final product that you will normally see. I wanted to know the art of being able to document that process that goes into the making of the theatre performance. So I did keep, this is one of the processes for one of my theatre performances that I had made. So, this is, and I wanted to document that process because it's what you see, the show that you normally see is not really what it is. It is the making of that show that is what it is, and I think it's completely raw, it's completely crazy, it's a different story altogether. And I have two students of mine sitting here actually who have been a part of my workshops and who know that before the final product goes up there, that whatever happens behind is absolutely raw and absolutely crazy. So I wanted to actually learn the art of documenting that. So that was my first important experience of archiving. My second important experience of archiving was actually in this project, which was called The One Taken by God. And this was on the completely opposite spectrum of what I'm talking to you about now. Because what happened was this, that I got an opportunity to again, funding from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and the Zuban Publishers in Delhi, to write a story, to basically write about a document about female shamans among the Bodo community in Assam. And that for me was again a very interesting moment for me personally, because of the fact that it was in many ways similar to documenting theatre, but also at the same time very different. Because here I was in the act of documenting the performance and the practice that the shamans were actually going through. But also at the same time, it was very different because I was literally documenting oral history. I was literally documenting an indigenous way of, indigenous art of life. And the interesting thing about me, I think we can go back to the other slide actually. The interesting thing about me was that initially I was very excited about the project, but as I started traveling the length and breadth of Assam, I started meeting the shamans, because we have very few of them now. Shamans belong to an indigenous religious practice called, that believes in worshipping Bato. That's the god that they believe in worshipping. And so it kind of, why it became different for me is that I started feeling the weight of that history on my shoulders, because I suddenly realized that I was doing something very, very important. There's this whole oral history tradition that has been going on, passed on from generations. I've heard about it, and other people tell me about it. The shamans have their own story behind it. The people associated with the shamans have their own story behind it. Our grandparents have their own stories behind it. And so I suddenly realized the weight of being the person who has to document that. It became even more challenging for me because of the fact that I was not somebody who was just standing at the periphery as an observer, trying to document something else happening, to someone else. Neither was I only a participant who was participating in the process of the act at all. What was happening was this, that I happened to be from the community myself. And so I think this is going to happen to a lot of us sitting in the room, that when we have to document something that belongs to us and our culture, that burden becomes even more, you really start going down under the weight of that burden, because you want to make sure that you're doing it the right way. You want to make sure that you're doing it in the most accurate way. You want to make sure that you're putting out there what needs to be documented. So yes, that was back in 2019, and probably if I would have to redo that project now, maybe I would have changed a lot of other things in it, because there are a lot of other inflections that I got into the entire art and into the story. Then my third experience with archiving happens after this, exactly when I finished this project, that was around the COVID-19 time. That is when I was selected as one of the scholars. India was celebrating 75 years of independence, so they came up with the British Council Creative Economics Scholarship, and they chose me as one of the scholars to go down to the University of Glasgow and study creative industries and cultural policy. That is when I got a very wonderful opportunity, wherein I worked on a project that was documenting art organizations around Scotland to see the work that they were doing, especially during the pandemic and how it had affected them. But my journey, the reason why I'm telling about this is because my journey there happened to give me a different insight to the very idea of archiving stories. Because of the fact that, it was not just the art organizations that I was looking at, were not just in popular cities like Edinburgh and Glasgow. They were in far-off regions, and you'll be surprised to know that actually there are so many different communities and cultures within those different regions in Scotland themselves, in far-flung areas, who have a lot of interesting stories of their own, long, historic, ancient stories of their own, and getting an opportunity to talk to the leaders of these art organizations gave me an insight of how, in so many ways, their style and their way of trying to, document their cultures that existed was in so many ways, could in so many ways be applicable to us, or was in so many ways, similar to what we are actually doing somewhere in the far end corner of the completely opposite corner of the world altogether. The picture there I've put up is of my interview with David Smith, who happens to be the festival director of the Scottish International Storytelling Festival. This is one of the oldest storytelling festivals. And why I've specifically chosen to tell you about this is because talking to him, I came to know about, he told me about how in this International Storytelling Festival, they have a lot of different cultures from around the world who come in. These are all, many of them have an oral history tradition in them. And he was telling me about the unique ways in which they found a way to document these oral history cultures and traditions and to actually put it out there to the people. So that was again a very important moment for me in my archiving journey. That brings me therefore to telling you about what exactly archives and museums are. And I'm going to get a little academic and theoretical here. Basically, this is what it has been defined as, that they are ideally placed for lifelong learning, probably educational institutions with a syllabus that keeps changing. I think all of you are aware from the old syllabus, we've now gone to the new education policy right now in our institutions. But I think what museums and archives do is that they provide us with this one location that we can actually resort to for lifelong learning. We have to understand that we can still display work, which is definitely probably the traditional way of displaying it. But now the beautiful option of how technology has changed is that it has allowed us to also turn that digitally and make it available to a wider and a more global audience. Also, of course, they act as catalysts for public life and creativity, and I think in order to make you understand better, I've actually picked up this very interesting definition of archiving that I think, in the form of this video, that I think will make more sense to you instead of me just talking about it.
Archives to me are really where memories are stored and history is made.
Archives are about democracy. They're repositories of knowledge. They're spaces where we save, items which relate to how things were done in the past and how things were done badly or how things were done really well.
It can be anything really. It can be medical equipment, it can be stuffed birds, it can be artworks and asteroids.
It's like ephemeral information, stuff that gives context to the main object, gives a bit of history, gives a bit of background. Material that is kind of gathered pertaining to a person or to a place or to an event or a kind of movement.
It's witness of thought and culture of people who lived before us in different ages and time, but an archive survives.
I think the importance of archives is that it can take us much deeper into the story than reading a book based on some sort of secondary account of what happened.
So therefore we come to the very important point of what exactly then is this archive, this document, or what exactly is this documentation. It can have a different context to different people, and I think we need to remember that when we are telling our stories about ourselves and our communities. I'll give you an example about what context means. For example, this two pictures may not have any context to you all, it has a lot of meaning and context for me. The first one is a picture of me as a child running to play with the waves in the sea, and my mother, of course, refusing to let go of my hand. And I think it's a very precious moment that coincidentally my dad happened to photograph. It holds a lot of meaning to me as an archive and a document of my own personal history. The second picture here is literally the last picture that I have with my mother. We will never ever share the same frame again and again. This was coincidentally taken by one of my sisters. Both my mother and I are looking in the same direction. And again, this has a lot of context for me in this whole point of what a document or documentation is. So we have to understand that when we are telling our personal stories, the context of why in our cultures and what stories we're telling, the context is also important. Therefore, I come to the process of now coming down to the process of what does the process of documenting actually involve? Before we, this is a very interesting quote or a very interesting way in which Michael D. Sergio actually talks about documentation or archiving. He mentions about how it's like looking at the world from a skyscraper, and I think you can read the words there, but just to paraphrase whatever is said out there, he's talking about our role as archiving is we're literally going right up there at the topmost peak, at the topmost point, looking at the world, looking at whatever it is that we are planning to document and trying to tell a story out of that. So we have to remember this. Therefore, when we are in the process of documentation, or you can call it archiving, and especially when we are in the process of doing so, whether it is about our own cultures or about somebody else's cultures. More importantly, when we're doing that for oral history traditions like most of us actually come from, it is important to remember the beginning part of it. How do you begin? The next slide, yes. So, questions to consider when you're doing that. First and foremost, you have to be prepared with this when you're trying to document. Number one, information is important. What type of information should be captured? We all decide to capture one aspect of our cultures. So what is that information that we're trying to capture? How do you think you can capture that particular information? And who can capture it, in the sense that sometimes it happens that way. It's either we are making the document, we are writing the document, but we can always go with somebody else who may have a proper insight and a proper relationship with the people concerned who are helping us capture that particular information. That's important. Then the structure is important. How can we take all this information, how can we take it, turn it, and actually present it as a whole? That's where the presentation is, where the dissemination part of it comes. Can we go back to the other slide, please? What is the most optimal way to make this information available? And also remember, who is the audience for? That's very important. I know that we go in thinking about documenting our cultures, that, oh, we'll let everybody read it. But we have to already kind of have the focus that, yes, at some point in the future, our secondary audience is going to be everybody. But right now, at the moment, what are we trying to target through this writing, through this documentation of all this content? Are we just adding on to a framework of knowledge, or are we? Is there an intention to turn it into an artwork and present it there for display to a global audience? For example, I remember the first speaker talking about how he was so interested in getting his books published globally at first, and then he got down to and then he talks about that. So the thing is that sometimes the focus and why you're doing it is also important. So we can think about that. That's, the audience is important. Therefore, what does this documentation process therefore involve? It involves all of this, an understanding that you can have a range of strategies and approaches. Be aware of that. I know very often, and I think this might happen to a lot of you out there, you want to sit down, you want to start writing, you want to start, not just about writing, archives can be in the form of a film, it can be in the form of a photo series, but sometimes maybe you don't know the beginning point because you feel that, oh my God, I have to study some more, I have to understand the art of archiving some more, but no, actually you can begin where you are with whatever knowledge that you have. So what happens is understanding that there are strategies and approaches out there that you can think of. You have to remember that you're striving for an accurate account, and here is where you have to remember that it is a fragmented piece. Let's remember that about our histories and about our culture as communities. The stories that we get are not really stories that are there, real, and exactly how it is. They all come in fragments. Our grandparents on our mother's side may have told us something else about the very same community that we are in, and our grandparents on our father's side may be telling us a completely different side. So you have to be aware of this fact that the material they're going to get is going to be fragmented. So there is no harm in knowing this, that you don't need to tell a complete story. You can just bring those fragments together and turn them into a whole. I used to do that with the theatre that I used to make, for example. We used to have workshops, we used to do different things, and all of those things would come together, and that would turn into the final performance that is going up there. So it's all these fragments. So we have to remember it's a fragmented process, and no harm if it remains in the fragments. Yes, you have to learn the art of connecting the dots and making those fragments be pieced up together beautifully. That's of course an art that you have to learn, in the process. Then you can use a range of different media. You can use video, photography, drawings, just small little sketches that you make of, you've gone to see let's say a worship, a cultural worship somewhere, an indigenous cultural worship. For your remembrance sake, even that tiny little rough drawing that you made is very, very important in your documentation process. Then you have to understand that you can use different forms of writing your stories. It can be anecdotal. Anecdotal means tell tiny little stories here and there and piece them up together to tell about this particular point of culture that you're talking about. It can be academic. If you're somebody who's very academic, very scholastic, who's studied a lot, who's gone through all the theories of archiving and documentation and culture reading and things, you can make it as academic as possible. You can also make it as creative as you want, and I think that's one thing which is really, really beautiful nowadays, is that we can just completely condense all of our, we can go crazy with that creativity and condense are different ways of approaching maybe other artworks and start using that in the way we kind of condense our stories for writing as well. And it can also alternate. You can have a mix of all of this. It's so much fun, for example, if you read a document that is anecdotal, that is academic, and at the same time it is really, really creative and actually keeps your senses and your ability to keep reading it throughout. Then state what your position is. This is important. This is where I will bring back my experience of documenting the shamans, the female shamans among the Bodo community as Assam. I suddenly realized what my position is, like I told you. I wasn't just at the periphery documenting something that was happening there. I was part of that community. So that is my position. So when you're writing about you're documenting something, whether you want to mention it or you don't want to mention it, know your position out there. Are you just going as a person who's standing by at the periphery to document something that is happening there? Are you going to participate in the process of whatever that cultural act is and then you're going to document it accordingly? Or are you, inverting the lens of not being the one looking, of being the outside gaze, if I may say so, but are you the one who's actually somebody from inside providing that, that scope? Then, as I mentioned, first impressions are very, very important. It's not necessary that your first impressions go into your document. None of us do that, right? When we write this particular assignment, whatever is the first rough work, we never put it up there. That's why it's called rough work. But they're important because the actual stories lie in our first impressions. I think you observed that. Like they say, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. But at the same time, when it comes to whatever you see, whenever you want to document, it is those first impressions that you've written down in diary form, in notes, and points, and sketches. Those are important because that's where the real story lies. So no matter even if 2 or 3 months have gone by since the time that you first started your research, and you thought that you've created a very beautiful document, always necessary, go back to your first notes. The first notes that you made will have so much more information than the final beautiful piece that you write after 3-4 months. Then, whatever you document in your documentation process, you're doing this, you're just collecting data right now. Everything that you've done, record the date, record the time, record the location. Sometimes it will be necessary for you to put that in your document there and then when you're finally making it. But sometimes, years later, the value of going back to the it might become small little notes that you may have written down at a particular point of time and date, may suddenly become historic reports about your culture that you may have just completely dismissed off. Maybe 20 years later, you can go back to it and suddenly realize it was a very historic moment that you had actually documented. So location, time, date, that's also very, very important. You have to write it down. And all the photographs, everything that is there. So now I'll talk to you about the post-production process. I like to refer to it as a post-production process because that's what we do. We collect the documents and then finally all the data, we piece it up together. So what does this post-production process actually involve? The next slide please, yes. So we can think of it as an assemblage. That is literally a term that has been made use of in the art world. It is used in philosophy, it is also used in archaeology, where you're bringing elements together. Bringing elements together, you can do it in the form of a collage, or you can do it in the form of a montage. And I even have for you technical definitions of what a collage is and what a montage is in the next slide. And this is just for your understanding technically what it's defined as, but to let you know that yes, collage and montage basically are two sides of the same coin. You kind of have a collage as an extension of an artist's palette or a writer's vocabulary, prose and poetic art, to include actual piece of reality or fragments of what the artist or writer is referring to. It is a direct quotation. It can be a literal repetition, a citation, something. A montage has been defined, on the other hand, as the cutting and reassembling of those fragments of meaning. So, collage might be all the fragments put together. Montage is you're cutting bits and pieces of those fragments and piecing them again so that you can make meaning out of them. So that it'll have images, it'll have quotations, it'll have borrowings, so that you can make new juxtapositions with it. So you have to approach your final documentation from the perspective of this. You've collected the data using all that, now you bring it together, piece it into something whole. Your final work, whether it's your documentation process or your post-production process, remember that it can include all of this. Do not discard any form of material that you come across. It can include maps, it can include plans, it can include sections, it can have time bases and chronologies, it can have lists, images, graphs, diagrams, drawings, photographs, videos, whatever. This is what it can include, and what it will involve, you have to understand, it will involve detail, it will involve plurality, and this is where it's very important, especially in terms of documenting oral history tradition, because the reason why we call it oral history is because the documentation process started very late. So you have to be aware of the fact that the documentation process in writing, I mean to say, has started very late. So many different, sometimes contradictory and divergent narratives are generated, so we have to understand that. We have to make sure that we can look at it from a sideways glance. That means sometimes you reveal some important information, we ask some other question instead, just to lead our way into what we're trying to ask. So you can be mindful of that. Sometimes you don't go to people and ask them directly about something, especially if it's something controversial, for example. Sometimes there are a lot of things that can turn into controversies in our cultures. So we have to maybe use that approach of trying to extract out information, but be ethical about it. That does not mean you're not ethical about it at the end of the day. Ethics are an important part of how you document it. People should know what you're putting in. They say that after you finally create the documentation, you actually kind of have to inform the people concerned who have been your resource persons that what is the approach that you're kind of taking. Then symptomatic reading is important, and you have to understand that what you're dealing with is the poetics of absence. When you finally sit down to write, what you're writing about is no longer there. Sometimes it's a cultural tradition that you may have gone to see. Sometimes it's a cultural tradition that you may not have ever seen. It doesn't exist, but there are people out there who are talking about it. So you have to understand that you're dealing with this whole aspect of the poetics of absence. So just to let you, I've talked to you about oral history, and I just wanted to actually bring out some of the methodologies of which some of the best institutions of archiving, not best, but some of the very good institutions of archiving have actually used. So I've just made a compilation, a montage, if you may say so, of what they have to say about their work, and so I just wanted to show it to you through this video.
So how do you discover the stuff you don't know? In the words of the great sage Don Rumsfeld, how do you get to the unknown unknowns? When most people imagine an archive, there is this fetishistic relationship with objects. But we're not about the object at all. We're about the knowledge that that object may have. And at its core, what we're trying to do is strip that knowledge away from that object and then circulate it for free so that it can go out and do whatever it's destined to do. Through the eyes of different people.
I'm the archivist at the British Museum, and I cover everything from the remains of an incendiary device that landed on the museum during World War II, not strictly archival, but in the archive just the same. There's a brick from the old museum, Montague House, also archived. There are fire buckets from when the museum had its own fire service and police service. There's even a pebble that allegedly achieved the greatest ever flight of such an object that was collected by Sidney Smith, a former keeper.
As a researcher at AA, my role is to collect materials from artists and practitioners in the art field, organize these materials, and make them available through the archive. We are currently getting ready to launch the archive of Dutch curator, tailor, and researcher Hans van Dijk, who was living and working in China in the 1990s. Hans was dedicated to archiving his activities, and in 2011, 9 years after he passed away, we were invited to digitize his personal archive in Beijing. As a researcher, it's very rewarding to disseminate a special collection like this and to see how scholars in the field digest and interpret these materials.
When you first walk into a space like this, you are experiencing it simply architecturally. There are so many boxes, so many albums. So what you see is just planes of stuff and blocks of colours.
Amongst the pioneering productions discussed is BBC's Life on Earth, which was broadcast in 1979.
So the problem was, what is this going to cost? It's obviously going to cost a lot of money. What would be a realistic budget? And because nobody had ever done a series on natural history, although the Brnoskian civilization series had been done, you could plan those, you know. If you're going to film it in a museum, you know where it is, it's not going to move, you know how many days you're going to spend there and so on. With the natural history, it's different.
During its 3-year production, Attenborough and the crew collectively travelled 1.5 million miles, visiting 39 countries and filming 650 species. They nearly lost the famous footage of mounting guerrillas to the Rwandan army.
We can't confiscate this film. We've been 10 days up the mountain getting all this, struggling around high altitude with heavy equipment in stinging nettles, and I thought, this is not on. So we, Dickie, while John and David distracted the security people, Dickie and me were changing the labels on the film. We were putting exposed labels on unexposed rolls, and then eventually we gave them the unexposed film, having hidden the exposed film.
We're cataloguing and digitising these unique recordings, along with an array of other natural history broadcast material, production paperwork, stills and promotional media.
We did a project called the South London Black Music Archive. So we turned Peckham Platform into an open archive where people could bring and map their stories of black music in South London. So they would bring all kinds of things. I have somebody's pass from the nightclub. We had lots of records because I also had a record player and all different kinds of music. So I wanted to be able to make sure that there was different ways in which people could access and contribute to that archive. So one of those devices was to have this big map of South London in which people could add to. People would send a text message with a story and we would add that to the map and to the place. Some of the values that I have seen through visiting various archives is being able to tell a quite marginal story, getting people to think about their role within those stories.
This video will take a behind-the-scenes tour of the archive, following the stages of the digitisation project with publisher Adam Matthew, from the initial assessment of materials of the project through to collection care and scanning. This short tour will show how this becomes one of these. Any digitisation takes place, a team of editors from Adam Matthew embark on a thorough assessment of the material, making several visits to the National Archives to carry out the necessary checks ahead of digitisation.
We take account of every document, its measurements and physical description, and look out for any large fold-out pages. All this information is passed to the scanning operatives, who use this to calculate the size of scanner which will be used and the amount of material which will be passed through it. We do this for everything that we will be digitising and publishing. We work closely with the Digitisation Conservation team because we value the long-term preservation of these documents. Working through the material in this way leads us to the discovery of real gems.
We often think of the advantage of digitisation being the preservation of the material in a new digital format, but the process also plays an important role in the preservation of the original document. Every document is surveyed by our qualified paper conservators in order to ensure that the access to the text is clear or that they are stable enough to digitise. All of the conservation work is undertaken before the scanning operators image the documents. In providing researchers access to the digital document, there is less need to present them with the physical document, thereby reducing the possibility of further damage. There are various kinds of damage we face when conserving documents for digitisation, but the most common are tears that are caused through repeated handling over time. The repair is an important step in the digitisation process. We do this by rejoining the two edges of the tear using a Japanese repair tissue and a coating of gelatin adhesive. It's vital that these documents are in a fit state to be scanned, and we work closely with the scanning operators to provide training on how to handle these fragile documents.
Setting up an efficient scanning operation is probably the most integral part of any digitisation project. We want to minimise the amount of time the documents are out of the repositories. The scanning itself takes place in our main scanning room, and it's a three-way collaboration between ourselves, Adam Matthew, and Capital Document Solutions. We each have dedicated individuals who work closely together to ensure that the work is carried out effectively.
Before any scanning commences, we must ensure that the correct technical setup has been achieved.
What we're looking for are digital images that represent the original document as closely as possible. Depending on the material, we are able to scan thousands of images a day, but obviously if the material is very delicate, fragile, brittle, that would reduce our output.
We wouldn't have been able to digitise our collections and expand their reach to new audiences without partnering with commercial publishers.
The reason why I wanted to show you some of these processes is because of the fact that to understand that in the process of archiving and having an archive out there, there can be, number one, creative ways of doing your work. Number two, there can be challenges. For example, we should not forget the socio-political challenges that might be involved in archiving. I think, like this document says, or when we talked about political situations and scenarios, about somebody putting up a case so that you no longer keep one documentation in your document anymore. And also, if we've been talking about digitization and something that our archive, for example, is trying to achieve. But we have to understand out there that there is a whole process that is involved, and we need the right infrastructure to be able to do that. So just to very roughly, I've already told you about the documentation process in general and the post-production bit of it. But just to give you some technical information of some archiving approaches, academically speaking. Of course, the most popular approach, the approach that we basically use from an academic perspective is the ethnographic approach of trying to document our cultures. And within this, we have to understand that ethnography actually is a Greek word. It means culture writing, because ethno means culture or community, and graph means writing. And it is something that is referred to as an interpretation of thick description, but we won't go into that technical term, thick description. Let's go to the more easily comprehensible term, that is the lived experience part of it. So we are in the act of documenting a lived experience. What are the methods that we can possibly actually use for this? Some very common methods that all of you can actually already start using to start documenting whatever oral history documentation that you want. You have participant observation, which of course is you become a participant in the setting. It normally takes in the form of field notes, and which are later on expanded and developed, of course, after field work is over. The next method is basically interviews. Remember that this whole point of interviews is to draw out personal meanings, is to draw out the evaluation of the content, is to draw out a comprehension of the content. You can make the use of the method of interviewing individuals, questions that are directed towards the individuals, or questions that are directed towards groups. It has been referred to as a focused, purposeful conversation. And here I want to mention to you that feel free to go either with a structured style or a semi-structured style. In fact, you should be prepared to go use a semi-structured format. What I mean by semi-structured format is that, when we say structured, we already have a list of questions out there. We meet our respondent concerned and we ask them all those questions, whether it is as individuals or as groups of individuals. But you also have to understand that semi-structured means you go prepared with a set of questions, but understand that along the way, as more information starts coming out to you through the conversation, feel free to deviate a little bit and change your questions a little bit as and when it is necessary. But that does not mean you go out of the topic, of course. You should learn the art of streamlining that, and so you have to be aware of that. So that can be the method of interviews. And then we also have document analysis. This is very, very important. And remember now, we may be talking about our cultures as oral history cultures, but remember that now in 2025, there's a lot of documents available out there. They may not necessarily be academic, historic, so really archaeological books out there, but there is a lot of documents that you will find. And you have to study all of those documents. It can be notes, it can be reports, it can be case reports, it can be diaries, biographical testimony, maps, photographs, newspaper reports, which actually let us know about the physical traces and settings of life. For example, I'll just let you know that as far as the Boros are concerned, the first document that was ever written was actually this diary that was kept by Reverend Sidney Endell, who was a missionary in Assam. And though right now there is a lot of debate and a lot of historians say that cannot be taken as a historical account, but a lot of these very same historians also mention that we cannot rule out the fact that his diary and his documentation does provide us with an insight of what he saw. I know we talk about the outside gaze, but let us not be so. I think we have to understand about this whole decolonization process and this whole outside gaze and We have to understand this, that it is important to know the inside gaze and to also know the outside gaze. It is important to understand how these have changed along the way, because that's what makes documentation, that's what makes archiving. What somebody sees, it's like human personality. They say that we are who we think we are what others think we are, and the truth is that we are actually what we are, which may just be a combination of these. So we have to understand the scope of that as well. But also understand, therefore, that because these are not historical records and probably may not be completely authentic, but may just be points of view, you never use this particular format on its own. You always use this in conjunction with other methodologies. Like you use it with participant observation, you use it with interviews, you use it with actually reading other theoretical academic books as well. You have to use a whole conjunction of methods. You don't use it on its own. Then there is, of course, visual methods as well that are part of the picture. So remember that you can produce. You may be doing this just to write, but please produce still and moving images. You can record it through that. You can ask, the interesting method that you can use sometimes when you're documenting something that's happening in a culture is you can ask the people who are part of that process to give them their idea in the form of visual forms like photographs and images about what they see, their point of view, their gaze in the whole picture. You have to gather these images of settings, and then, it can include all of this. It can include photographs, it can include film, it can have maps, pictures, digital media and other art forms. And remember that is relevant whether you want to turn it into just a piece of writing, whether you want to turn it into a film, whether you want to turn it into a photo series, or maybe at some point you can just turn it into a very beautiful creative exhibition that actually shows all of these important documents that led you curated in such a way that it led you to your final document that was there. So these are also some of the methods. And in today's day and age, do not forget to actually make use of digital methods as well. When I talk about digital methods, can we have the next slide, please? When we have the digital methods and data, remember this is important. You know why? Because today, the conversations that happen in social media today about something that is cultural and community-oriented is going to be history tomorrow. For example, regarding the Shirui Daily Literature Festival, everything that has gone to Instagram or Facebook or to any other form of social media, every conversation that has taken place, 50 years later, this is going to be the document about the first Shirui Daily Literature Festival that happened out there. So, and then also understand that people start talking about cultures and people have not. So looking at those digital means and trying to kind of use them to also get an understanding is very important. And again, that said, remember we are worried about authenticity and we are worried about making sure that we're putting out the right sources. So use it again in the combination with another methodology. So just to give you an idea, when you're documenting oral traditions, you can remember this stepwise, which may help you. There is a process that you're documenting. There is a performative aspect of that process that we are documenting. The fact that people decide to represent their cultures by wearing a costume and standing somewhere or walking into a room itself is actually a performative practice that we should not forget about and what it signifies at a particular moment, in a location, at a particular time and date. Capture the processional changes. There will be changes that take place, but do not discard one story because it does not authenticate to another story. And ideally speaking, honestly, actually we should not even have to put away certain stories because we don't agree with them or somebody else doesn't agree with them, because every little story about our oral history culture becomes a part of that particular culture. I read a very interesting book about performing heritage, wherein this lady talks about the Matka Pir Dargah that is there in Old Delhi. And she talks about how matkas are water pitchers, and you find the water pitchers hanging on the trees, and that's a ritual that people who come to hang those water pitchers are basically people who put them in as offerings every time they have come to this particular dargah to get their diseases or ailments or whatever that they have cured. And they said that the whole point of hanging it there was because it has a historical significance, and I won't come to that, of course, because of time. But the whole point of hanging it there was that the caretaker of the dargah, was using it as a waste management system because he didn't know what to do with all of those water pitchers. But they say that over time that turned into a ritual. It became a ritual that people started believing that if you tie up those water pitchers, your wishes will be fulfilled. So what happens is, when she writes about it, she talks about the reality of the practice, what really happened that was part of a waste management process. But she also mentions about how now people do it as a ritual. So, which means there are two sides of the story that we are getting to know about. So in other words, when you're documenting, therefore, remember that there are changes that are happening. Document all of that. Do not leave out anything. Then you have to also understand, are you doing it from an education perspective? Are you doing it, of course, I think the larger picture is to understand, contribute to knowledge, which is finally, at the end of the day, we're contributing to this whole framework of knowledge that exists. So that brings me to the definition of oral history in the next slide. This is one of the definitions. What is oral history? It records oral testimonies, traditions for use as historical evidence, stems from a cultural tradition of orally passing down information one generation to the next. Oral cultures have used the spoken word, so in different forms. They can be narratives, legends, myths, songs, proverbs, prayers, poems, theatre and riddles. And the picture that I've used is of this was a re-edited book, so the second actual historical account that they say that was created about the Boros in Assam happened to be written by Hafdan Sijir, and it was later on, in the recent times, it has been edited by Peter B. Anderson and Santosh K. Soren, taking the help of scholars like Anil Boro, etc., to give them more insight, because it so happened that the said author Hafdan Sijir had written some points, but in the process of decolonizing and trying to understand the culture better, the new editors definitely wanted to get the perspective of the Boros themselves to be able to re-edit the book and present it that way. Of course, it is now in today's day and age, even this historical account will be considered quite old, and we need more for that, but I just use this as an applicable picture to this point about oral history. So, when we are documenting oral history, very important to understand two important points. Accuracy is key. Be accurate. This is goes repeatedly, that whatever versions of the stories that you've heard, be accurate in documenting them. Second important point is your positioning. Where do you stand and how are you documenting this? Keep remembering that whenever you're documenting it. That's very, very important. And that said, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to now show you first this video. This is about one of the first videos that we made of the Northeast India AV archive that I will present today. So I'm first going to show you this small little short trailer of our organization at the point when we had just started and had done a few projects. And if you want to know more about our current projects, I would definitely like you to log into our website, which give you an insight of the number of other really amazing and interesting projects that we're actually coming up with now, although we are only 5 years old. I would like to end with this particular video, and the reason why I picked up this video, I found it on, is because of the fact that number one, we are an audiovisual archive, so we understand the importance of films. At the same time, we understand the importance of recording stories, and I just wanted to, as an end note, I wanted to leave with this very interesting video that I think, that I found very, very interesting. This is about the British Film Institute and the very beautifully captured audiovisual material that they have collected over the years.
Do you know that it was dots are moving forever?
I just came to show you some films.
I never thought there could be a place as good as this.
Does it surprise you?
So on that note, I would like to end my presentation here, and of course, I would like to thank the very wonderful team of the Shirui Literature Festival who has been so hospitable and so organized about this entire thing. Thank you so much for your invitation to us, Northeast India Audiovisual Archive. Also Shem out there, who has been painstakingly just changing my slides exactly how I told him, and he did an amazing job, I think, because I told him only once and I think he got it right. And also the entire technical management team there who made sure that the sound and the video worked really, really well. So once again, thank you to this wonderful team, Lung, Wangachan, who's amazing, and all the others. Sorry, don't know everybody's names, and of course, my two very favorite students who are in this room, Ningye So, who was, by the way, part of one of the productions, the pictures of which I had put up out there. He actually played a very instrumental role in coming up with a very important part of the entire thing. Sorry to put you on the spot. And of course, the amazing Wanga Chan, who is also a student of mine. So absolutely, again, this is an archive of beautiful moments of coming back together. So I would love to leave you as a thank you note and as a thought to all of you about archiving and documentation. As an end note, I would leave you behind with this, one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite authors. Thank you.
Are there any questions that you have to ask that you want to know? It's open. Yes. Absolutely.
Thank you, ma'am, for coming. Thank you so much for the presentation. Oral history. When it comes to oral history, it can be forged or manipulated. So today, Manipur is fighting ethnic clash because we are not having proper history. villages among the Tamil are fighting because we don't have proper written history. So prior to colonization and Christianization, we are reporting only through oral history. So my question is, how can we know that the oral history is authentic? You have mentioned something on that, but I want you to enlighten more. How can we know that it's an authentic oral history? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. I'd like to put it this way, since I also come from a background of advertising. If you've observed, every time they sell us any, even a disinfectant, they always tell us it is just 99% useful. There's always that doubt of the 1% that is there. But that's what oral history is always going to be. And I think I totally agree with you that it's impossible today to achieve authenticity. But I think our role out here is to be very, very thorough as we possibly can be. If we're trying to document a story, for example, when I was telling you about my own attempt at documenting about the female shamans of the Bodo community, I think it's very important for me. Till now, I don't feel happy because of the fact that I still feel that it's very important for me to go to do an absolutely thorough research, to go to every single person out there, to go to every single source out there, pick up whatever they have to say. And I think, like I mentioned, put all those fragments together, like if need be, literally lay them down and try to mention every single story, however different. One point may be very one story about an act may be very different from another story about the act. But therefore, our job, is accuracy, that we don't try to edit it out. For example, a lot of people, what they do is that they intake interviews, and then when they're in the process of transcribing and translating, they start changing the words. So, for example, we will take a documentation of an oral culture, and then when we are trying to, translate it into our writing, maybe in English, or even in the language itself, we try to paraphrase the whole thing according to our own understanding. I think actually that is wrong. Sometimes even small little inflections like, an when somebody is talking to us, or a word that they suddenly use, becomes an important emotion that you have to note it down exactly that way and keep that intact. So I feel that our role is to pick up all the stories, however opposing they are, put them out there in our document, present our own perspective of what we think is the accurate form, and maybe mention that after doing all this research and talking to all these persons and all these opposing notes, this is what I feel, mention that clearly, but leave it at that. I think we cannot ever achieve authenticity. It's like, I don't know if there are any film students out here. We have this very famous Japanese film that we always study in filmmaking, that is Rashomon, which talks about selective perception, where you have an act that happens in the forest, and there are a lot of people who either are part or who witness the act. But each one who goes out there has a different version to tell. We have to understand that oral history tradition is like that. We will all be a part of a moment, but what stories we go out and tell the people might be on the perspective of what we thought was important to us. We pick that up. So I hope that answers your question. I think we will never be able to achieve authenticity, but we can try to be as accurate as possible.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes.
In fact, to aid to the discussions in terms of very enlightening to listen to you, but I have a bit of in terms of these methodological questions. So for instance, you use about the kind of methods, say ethnography, participants' observations, oral history. Isn't there elements of the coloniality being embedded in that? So if we continue to use such methods, aren't we also in a way reproducing the colonial epistemology? So is there a way where tribals or indigenous methods can be embedded within the whole ecosystems of trying to understand the kind of interpretations of the realities? For instance, when you and I as a researcher start experiencing the kind of reality of our participants, how do we represent that? That's very reflective. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, actually, and I think, yes, I do agree with you, and I did put up the ethnographic method out there as one of the approaches, because as I mentioned, there can be many different approaches, and sometimes when we're trying to just start off with the act of doing the job, very often we don't at all start because we feel we don't know where to start. So no harm in going back to an age-old method which may have been brought down to us maybe through a colonial history, as you mentioned, but no harm in going back to it, because sometimes we have to learn how to get everything, and sieve it out and pick up the things that are important to us. I think that's important, I feel. But in terms of answering your question about what are the different methods, yes, there are many other different methods. That's why I did, therefore, talk about creative ways. For example, our cultures have storytelling methods, whether it is an Indian culture with the sutradhar who keeps narrating the story, or whether you have the puppetry, which is of different. It's amazing how theatre and puppetry in our country can be so different, but they tell stories and they document such important stories. For example, there's a whole legend that is behind the act of shamanism, and this has been done through the process of, it has been documented through the process of theatre. So I think we can start using our own methods. There's this, I know about the concept of Hawar singing, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, among the Khasis, where what they do is that they start singing and the words just, they sing in, I think couplets, in 4 lines, if you follow the term is for that, and they keep changing it according to what they see out there. So I think the important thing is here is it's very valid, it's very important that use these methods that have been around as a starting point, so that you can start, I think as researchers we know that, I think we were studying, we were told that we have this habit of collecting so much of material but we don't start writing, because we're still collecting. But I remember being told by my supervisors that start writing down at least the first sentence. So I think methods of this age, methods of this kind can be the starting point. And then we can look for creative ways and beautiful ways. And as somebody who has been in the academic profession dealing with a lot of young people, I cannot tell you that yes, a lot of people talk about their reading habits going down, they talk about their destructive habits, but something that I've seen about the students is the creativity with which you give them an assignment and tell them, do what you want with it. Look at the beautiful ways in which the things, so I think we have a method there. And also, I'm sorry if I'm taking long in answering this, but I just wanted to also mention about this that I think I do understand this whole thing about decolonization that is the big rage. I mean, it's not just the big rage, it is important, I don't doubt it. But I think there is something which we have to understand and be a bit open-minded about our way of recording our own work and also approaching history and everything else. There's no harm in learning from somebody else because we ourselves are also teaching them. When you start studying in the Indian context, we are probably still studying in the Western concept. But when you go to the Western context, there are Indian methods that are being adapted. For example, when I was studying about recording of documenting performance or performances or doing performances, we were looking at the lens from an Asian perspective because our way of doing theatre and our way of recording them was something that they were beginning to learn about. So I think we have to be a little open-minded about this and not be so narrow-minded that in the process of trying to preserve our culture, and I think that's the problem with us, the whole country actually, not just the Northeast. We are too busy trying to just stick to very narrow-minded points of view, not understanding that look at everything. Do not forget that you can just see the information out and not just try to be completely westernized or completely, like right now I think the influence is a lot of South Korean culture is there. Learn to retain what it is and learn to keep it alive. For example, I've been educated in English institutions throughout, but at home I still talk in my mother tongue. That is still the conversation that we have in, that is still the things that we do with. So I think we kind of no harm in picking up, I feel. I hope I didn't take too much time in answering that, and I hope it I do completely agree with that and add on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? I think we can continue with asking questions tomorrow as well. Will you still be here tomorrow? Okay, so we can personally go up to her and ask questions and know more about what they do, and we can also express interest in what she does for ourselves also, for our community also. We will move on to the next session. Thank you so much, Rosemary, for this wonderful enlightening session. This will be the last session, so we'll make it, we are beyond time, so we'll make it brief but very impactful. We have a panel discussion with Dipti Talwar, Ankush Haikya, Hermione Kalling, and Subitaba. I hope I pronounced Hermione as in the Harry Potter Hermione. Yeah. It's a wonderful, beautiful name, Hermione Khalin and Subitaba. This session, Beyond Legends, Imagining the Now in Contemporary Fiction, will be moderated by Worngchan Chatsang and Ashim Zimik. Worngchan Chatsang has always been captivated by places, people, and the stories that connect the community. He has developed a passion for writing and photography, using both to share meaningful narratives. He writes for Nespas and is a contributor of Village Square. He is also a documentary contributor of Good Food Movement. Ashim Zimik teaches in Sentinel College. Yes, she's a lecturer there, and she herself is a published author. So I welcome every one of you on stage, and I give you the time.
Very good afternoon, very good evening, I should say, everyone. I think we are more of a crowd up here than down there, but I guess it's the session and how riveting it is that matters rather than the crowd, and I hope it will be a meaningful session for all of us. It's the last one. I'm sure everyone's tired, but let's pull through this together. All right. Mankind in general have always relied on stories to make a sense of the world around them, and for small communities like us, we've always relied on our folk tales and folk narratives to give us an understanding of who we are and where we come from. But in this current juncture, I think it's also important that we look towards where we're headed, and that starts with now. And with myths and legends that have shouldered the responsibility of anchoring our human experience for such a long time, I think with contemporary fiction, we move beyond inherited narratives that come with myths and legends. So this session is all about that, talking about fiction in the now and how we can take that forward. So with me on stage we have such a great panel. I would like to introduce 4 panelists here, esteemed panelists, 3 who are great writers and 1 who has done great work to turn manuscripts into best-selling books. So I'll start the introduction. On the far left is Ankush Saikia. He is a journalist and writer from Shillong, and he has written over 11 books. His style of writing is one where, if you read any one of his books, you're in the thick of action, you become part of the book. He is so descriptive, and his writing style is so immersive as you become part of the narrative. And we hope that your journey here will also lead to something down the line that has to do with a novel about maybe a group, or maybe it'll take a short part in your book. And next to Ankush is Deepthi, who has done such wonderful books. We've had her session earlier, so I'm sure all of you know how knowledgeable she is in the publishing industry. And yeah, over the course of the 20 years, almost 2 decades that she has been in the publishing industry, I think she has played a key role in, like I say, turning many manuscripts into best-selling books. And also, right now, I truly believe that she plays a very, very key role in upholding the legacy of Penguin as one of the leading publishers and one of the most celebrated publishing houses in India. So now that we're moving from left to right, I would like to introduce my co-host Ashim Zimik, and I would like to ask her to introduce the 2 other panelists.
Our next speaker is Kalim, a writer from the Koibu Naga tribe, a recipient of the Penguin Random House Open Mic Poetry Award. Amani is the author of 3 published novels available online, with 3 more currently in progress. Her debut poetry collection, In the Hour of My Heart, is available in print, and 2 of her novels are also featured on Audible India. Please join me in welcoming the powerful voice and storytelling spirit of our next author is Subi Dava. She's an Arunachali poet. She's an acclaimed poet and writer from Arunachal Pradesh, a recipient of the prestigious New Asian Writing Short Story Prize in 2020. She is also a South Asia Speaks Fellow, whose debut fiction Tales from the Dawnlit Mountains was published by Penguin Random House. Her evocative poetry collection, Dear Bohemian Man, earned her a spot among the 100 inspiring authors of India in 2018. Shirui storytelling has also been recognized internationally with a shortlist for the Twist and Twain Short Story Prize 2021. Beyond her literary achievements, she serves her community as an agriculture development officer. Please welcome her on stage.
Thank you, Ashim. I think we forgot to give applauses to Ankush and Dipti, so can we have 2 rounds of applause for them as well? Thank you. So, Dipti, I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to start off with a question for the 3 writers. I'm going to throw it on and off, and I hope someone of you will pick it up. So, what inspires you to write about contemporary fiction? Is it something to do with personal experience, or is it social satire, or is it just a document done now, or has it something to do with letting your imagination run wild? I throw this out in the open, and any one of you 3 can start.
Yeah, hi. First of all, thank you for having me here. And I've been to Manipur before a couple of times, including once on a reporting assignment. And each time I was supposed to have come to Ukhrul, but I somehow never worked out. So, in fact, I was planning to come later this year. But when they invited me, I said, yes, so thanks for having me here. And I think I sort of agree with the whole panel discussion thing is about, the way I started writing, I think it was really about what we were taught in college, doing English, and it was sort of like literature with, with the capital L. It's supposed to be something up there, beyond us. Whereas I always felt that, we could make stories of life that was sort of around us. And so I think all of my writing has been in one way or the other about, whatever I've seen around me. And of course, if you're turning into fiction, then of course anything like characters and plot. But it's really also about the setting, as you mentioned. So most of it is set in places that I know well, Shillong, Delhi, and parts of Assam, bordering on Arunachal. I think I keep coming back to those places time and again. So it's really about valuing, what you see and hear around you more than anything else. I think all of the writing has sort of stemmed from that.
Okay, thank you. Hermione, Subi.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I want to thank the organizing team for giving me this opportunity. I feel really privileged and humbled to be here. This is my 2nd time in Ukhrul, and both the visits, the weather has been so pleasant. And the environment, everything has been so welcoming, and I do enjoy my stay here. To answer your question, the reason why I started writing contemporary doesn't really mean, the reason why I started writing is because, we often hear folk tales and folklores from our parents, from our grandparents, and it does resonate with us, even though they are stories from the past, because usually, for me as a writer, I am someone who likes to focus a lot. It is not because I choose to, but it is the way I see, the way I feel. I focus a lot on the emotions, and I feel that emotions are universal and timeless, whether it be from the past or now. But the fact remains that emotions has evolved through time. It does not evolve entirely, but changes do happen, take place, and sometimes it fascinates me a lot, the things that differ from what used to be and how it is, and I value that. I feel it needs documenting, it needs to be told, and I think it's just as important and beautiful, and that makes me write. Thank you.
Hi Ukhrul. I am very happy to be here, and my thankfulness to the festival organizers for inviting me. And Manipur has been a very special place in my heart because my dad studied in Manipur. He studied in Sainik school till his class 12. So even if I was not in Manipur, I feel like I was always in Manipur as a part with my dad. So I'm very happy to be sharing this stage with these wonderful writers. For me, as Ma'am Rosemary has said about this archiving, I feel like I am someone who is a living, walking body with eyes that loves to archive everything that I see. And most of my stories I write because they have moved me in some way, whether it may be because of the humor I see in a man sitting there, or it could be sadness I have seen about a father losing his daughter. So whatever moves me and whatever that remains in my memory, I try to write it into a story. And there are many moments in my life that I have felt so many things, and I feel like if I had the time and if I had the voices of so many memories, I would love to write as much stories as I can.
Wonderful. It's really nice. It's really enlightening to hear all the experiences and why you started writing from all the authors. I think this resonates with everyone. What Tipti and I were talking about when we first met last night, about how emotions is universal, and how if you can touch upon the emotions of the readers, you can always capture their attention, and how any story that has emotions in it has the ability to captivate anyone. So I think all that the three of you have said resonates with that. And now I would like to direct my question to Tipti, and I would like to ask her, as an editor, how do you achieve, how do you turn a manuscript that has all the facets of being a very good book, but that lacks maybe a little bit of the emotional connection that we're talking about here? And how do you help the book? How do you help elevate the book from this to the next level?
It's really subjective, and I think it changes from manuscript to manuscript, and it's a collaborative process. I think we were discussing this in the previous panel as well. It's just really that relationship between an author and editor. It goes on for a really long period, right? You're in touch for months, and I haven't met most of my authors. It's just online, but it's you're giving feedback, they're taking feedback or discounting feedback, and it's just I think a sense that an editor develops over time. I think writers just get better the more they write. I'm assuming hopefully that editors also get better the more they edit, and you take a step back and you see what needs to be done, and if you've worked with that author before, that's also really helpful because you know what they can or you sense what they're trying to do at least, and what possibly could be better. But it completely varies from manuscript to manuscript, what edits go in.
Thank you. I believe Tipti and Ankush have also worked together previously, and I would like to now ask Ankush how the experience of working together with Tipti was, and the things that go into writing 11 books.
Don't worry, I'm not going to say anything. No, it's interesting. She's here right beside me. My God, it feels just like yesterday, but it's actually almost 20 years ago. So the first manuscript of mine, which I wasn't even really sure would be a novel of sorts, but I had sent it to you, I think, right, at Rupa, and then so that came out in 2007 as Jet City Woman, which again was about really nothing much. It's just about a typical aimless, clueless guy from the northeast who lands up in Delhi and spends his time doing nothing much, and then gets his heart broken and then comes back to the northeast. So that's about it. But I think in the middle of all that, again, it was about things I saw and heard, and so that came out in 2007. So then it went out of print, and so I managed to get the rights back, and I put it up as an ebook. I think 2 years back or so. And so I went through the entire manuscript before uploading it on Amazon, and so there were places I felt really embarrassed. It's like being given a glimpse of yourself as somebody 20 years ago or something. But at the same time, there are things which I was pretty surprised because North Campus at that time, and this place Majnu Katila, and then the whole .com thing which was happening at the turn of the century. So I think those things are captured pretty well, even if I say so myself. And so it's there as a sort of document, and again, I think quite a few of my books, I don't think anything of that sort has been done before. again, I think it goes back to what I said about always feeling that somehow, there's something missing in the Indian context, or even in the North Indian context. I think too much of an education at times it sort of puts you in the wrong direction, Whereas I always felt more comfortable, like for instance, hanging out with people who didn't read books, because I felt, there was more to learn from the way they looked at things. So, but yeah, that was a long time ago, and very nice to meet her here in the Crude of all places.
I wanted to add that that book, Jet City Woman, which I loved so much, and I'm not saying it because he's here, is that I still remember scenes from that book so vividly. It's so evocative, and I think that's what's important also about writing a contemporary novel, is that you're really capturing a time and a feeling, and like you said, it's about this guy who comes home feeling really lost and lonely, and it's astonishing that I still remember so clearly some of those scenes that you.
I think it only goes on to tell what a prolific writer he is. And I would like to throw this out, not specifically to Ankush, but generally to all the authors here. So I think most of us have written before, and like you said, you come back years after, like maybe 10, 20 years after you first wrote a book, and you read it again and you felt like, there's something like that. How you wrote all those years ago. So for the authors, how do you get past the stage of looking at your writing and like cringing at it, and then moving forward to that and accepting that maybe this is how the writing process goes?
I'll share a small anecdote on that. My first book, Dear Bohemian Man, which is a poetry collection, and I published it myself when I was in university. So during that time, I really felt that book, and I really felt those emotions. And most of the poems were love poems when I might have felt something for someone and going through some sad moments in my life. But if I look at that book now, I feel slightly embarrassed. And if I go on, panel discussions, and there will be some literary critic or some university professors asking me really serious, literary questions about those poems, and I feel so shy and funny sometimes, talking in details, because the book title is Dear Bohemian Man, and they'll ask who is the Bohemian Man? So, going back to your question, sometimes some words, it becomes slightly embarrassing at times, but then, you have to accept that that has also been a part of your life as a young girl.
Question is for you, Subi. Actually, the poetry collection that your poem, my Bohemian Man, actually, you have developed over the years your writing. Compare your writing, the poetry collection. This one you published with Penguin. It is one of the best short story collection. If the Tangkos, they read it, they'll find it is so similar. There is a similarity between African tribal stories. Most of our Northeasterners will have similarity. So what you've done is you've documented oral history, myth, along with fiction. Do you find a struggle between creative freedom, and between trying to get the oral narrative down?
So my intention and my ambition with this book was to write a book which introduces people, especially thinking in mind the mainland readers, to my community and to the people of Arunachal Pradesh, with cultural, focusing on the cultural patterns, the traditional beliefs, myths, the landscape, because I think besides Mamangdai, not many Arunachal writers have been published in the main publishing, and her writing mostly focuses on her tribe. So I tried to write a book which focuses not I tried to write about the headhunting practices which was done in certain communities in Arunachal like Nokte and Wangcho, and also like my community, we follow this certain animism religion which is still practiced today called Doni Poloism. So that particular religion is getting lost due to religious appropriation. So my intention was also to have like discussion or maybe debates on how our primitive animist religion is getting lost today. So I tried my best to touch different parts of Arunachal, and Arunachal is a big state with 26 major tribes, so it's not possible with one book, but I tried my best and I tried everything I could so that when people read this book, they can feel the landscape, they can feel the traditional priest chanting in their small hut, they can feel the animals, flora and fauna of Arunachal Pradesh through my writing.
Continuing with that, while writing, you have gotten those flora and fauna very specifically. You have also painted the sceneries very specifically. When you're writing a story about, say, the shamans, you literally capture that essence. And when you move on to the next story, there's a whole different essence. We don't know who the new author is. Can you tell us something about the creative process, the research you had to go through in order to create this book?
I think, like you said, most of the stories are very different from each other. And I had one person who didn't know about my gender, and they thought that I was a man, because this book is very manly book. Most of the main characters are men, and they are written from a man's point of view. So emotionally, I think for the writing process, I feel like I had to become like the character. Like while I was writing the Headhunter story, which is named Macabre Memories of a Headhunter. So in that story, there is one headhunter who is, but it won the International Booker Prize, At Night the Blood is Black. So actually one of my friends suggested me to read that book, and in that book also it's told from the point of view of someone who is going through a battle and how his mental health and psychology gets affected due to the violence in the war. So that book also gave me an idea of how a person, and in the story I tried to make that person the character of that person in gray area. He's not a good boy, he's not a bad boy. He's good sometimes, he's bad sometimes. So a gray character I tried to paint. And that same way, like in the shaman story, I wrote that story because I saw real ritual done by shaman in our villages, and how regretful a shaman, a local shaman feels today, because they have lost their value and importance in the society. In our grandfather's time, a shaman was called for every childbirth. They were summoned for death. If somebody died, they were summoned for sickness, because there was no medical facilities during old times. And if someone gets sick, if someone has like sickness in the stomach, also people will say that the ghost, the forest ghost has caught that person, or some kind of evil eye has been aimed at that person. So the shamanism was a very popular cultural practice in my village, and that way I saw a shaman practicing a ritual one day, and he told me that he was my father's classmate in school. And my father, he studied in Sainik school in Imphal, and he finished his class 12. He did his bachelor's and master's also in Nagaland University, because in Arunachal we didn't have proper university during that time. So he became a professor in a university, and he did very well in his life career. But that shaman, who was also a friend of my father, and who was in fact better student, because I believe people who can do shamanism, they have this exceptional gift of memory, and they have this exceptional exceptional gift with words, and if they are into literature or any creative field, they can do wonders because of their natural ability to grasp, the visible or the invisible things in this world. So he was very regretful, and he was telling that his father prevented him from going to school with my father because during that time a priest was the highest position in a village. So that observation about the regret in that shaman's face gave me an inspiration to write that particular story. And I remember that shaman saying that sentence that he wanted to dig out his father's grave and break his skull because of his missed opportunity in his life and because of what he could have been if his father didn't prevent him from going to school. So that way I tried my best to become that particular character while I was writing the particular stories.
Question for you, Hermione. Your poem, I Became a Folktale. So let's look at, in that perspective, you have spoken about love, but can we look at it from another perspective? Can we look at it as looking at culture or looking at folklore? So all of us, we become folktales in a way. We have folktales, we're defined by that. So while adjusting that, while adapting that, creating that to modern contemporary writing, what are the challenges you face? You turned the poetry into your own emotions. Can you talk a bit about the creative process?
This poem was created out of sheer impulsion. Just half an hour before I submitted my final manuscript to the publishing house, I wrote it 30 minutes before the submission. There was no proofreading, nothing. It was just sheer out of impulsion. And at first, I did write another poem based on a folklore, and I wanted to write more, but due to time constraint and a deadline, I did not have time to explore others. But I still wanted to do something with folktale, so I literally wrote a poem that had the word folktale in it. So it was about love, of course, but yeah, if I have to look at it in a cultural perspective, what is a folktale is the first question. It is a story, a tale, which usually no one is sure if it really existed or not. There is an uncertainty part of it, and bringing it into the context, imagine there's a couple. Imagine there's a couple and they're deeply in love, and something bad really happens. They had a really crazy, chaotic experience, and they broke up. And suddenly, the story of their love story becomes. It usually happens in a very close-knit community, especially like mine, because we are not much in number, and those stories become the talk of the village. It becomes everybody's stories. Everybody shares in it, and usually, if you don't give it much respect, people tend to add on to the story, and they become a tale that everybody shares. But somehow along the way, we lose the truth that it holds. So, looking at a cultural perspective, it is to question how far can we take the story with us and share it. Suppose you and I have a story that is ours. For someone like me who really considers my emotion as the holy grail of my life, I don't want people to just pollute it and talk about it. And that is one of the main reasons. That is the main point of this. I want people to approach the story that is shared within our community with a certain form of respect. Of course, stories will be shared among us, but there should be a limitation of how far we can express upon it, how far we can expand upon it. And I want people to approach it with a certain kind of respect and love, so that we get to hold the truth still, even if it is shared among us. And the question of I have experienced something. I have experienced love. Let's take it for example. And I don't want my paint, my love to, I don't want somebody else in my community to take ownership of my pain and my emotions. I want it to be mine. So I don't want it to be a folktale. This, the poem that I wrote, I Became a Folktale, is a representation, is a presentation of actually what's happening in the village, but in its all subtle, hidden way, it is also a nostalgic rebellion of how not to do that. Yeah, that is mostly that.
This one is for Ankush. So Tipti has already mentioned what I mentioned about the lasting image that you leave on your readers. So we talk about the environmental aspect of it, but what about the character aspect of it? How do you shell out your characters in such a way that you've written a lot of books? They are not like the characters are not same for two books. How do you make sure that the characters for one book is a little different from the other one, and how do you get into developing that character?
I don't know, that's the mystery of the whole thing, you know. If I knew, I would tell you, but I don't have much idea myself. But no, I mean, it's, I think a lot of it has to do with it's similar to cooking, you know. I mean, you sort of, with enough practice, I think you know what's right, and then you sort of go on and that. But also, I realized, I think, over the years, so you're working on something, and there are projects that you sort of leave after a while, because, I mean, I get the sense that it's not working, you know. There's nothing true in it. So instead of sort of just trying to force yourself to complete it, it's better to let it go. And but in other instances, there are instances where you feel that things are sort of working out, you know, there's something alive in it. So at the moment I'm doing a graphic novel with this graphic artist from Guwahati, who is based in Guwahati. So it's, I don't know when it's going to see the light of day, because firstly I think it's going to take a lot more time illustrating it than it takes me to write the script. And who's going to publish it, but let's see, I'm hopeful. The story itself is, I think, something that's not been told before. It's set in the 1930s, 40s and 50s, 3 installments, set in sort of eastern India of that time, you know, when places like Burma and Bengal were part of one unit. So it's a sort of adventure story, and so I was a bit worried at first, you know, how am I going to, I've never done any historical sort of writing before, but the thing is, I think I had an interest in that time period, you know, read books, and so you try to sort of imagine yourself in that space, especially if it's a sort of an action-oriented story where things are happening. So I felt it was working out pretty well, you know. And the guy who's doing that, who's going to be doing the art, he and then the agency in Delhi that's taken it, I mean, signed it up, they've liked it too. So, you know, I feel that I haven't really gone too wrong. So, but the thing there is, I could feel myself that it's working, you know. So that's I think you sort of have to trust your own intuition at times, which again is a difficult thing, because that again takes time, I think, you know. I mean, the longer you spend, like Deepti said, I think the longer you do something, the better you get at it. So I think it's like any other profession, you know.
Have you ever had times where you've dreamt of your characters, like a lucid dream of a character that you're writing or that you're sharing out at the moment? Have you ever had times where you've had a very lucid dream of the character that you're sharing out for the current book that you, or any current project that you're writing? Any experiences where you dreamt of the character that you were writing about?
No, not really. I haven't dreamt of it. But like I forget who said it, but I think in all of the main characters you write, there has to be a bit of you, you know, in some way or the other. Otherwise, they're not going to come alive. And when the characters come alive, and sometimes they do or say something that you haven't really thought of, then you realize that it's sort of working
out. Subir wants to take on that question.
So
I don't have a lucid dream about my characters, but there's one funny incident. I wrote a manuscript where there is a main character and he has a friend who doesn't have his legs, and then he's legless. And that particular character, comes to my mind many times because I have kept aside that manuscript, but that character just comes to my mind and then he taunts me like, when are you going to finish this book? When are we going to see this book? So that particular character, his name is Hassan. It's a Muslim character and he is a war victim from Syria. So I just wrote a story long time back, and that particular character just keeps coming to my mind again and again, asking me, when will you finish this book?
I believe stories are living entities in themselves, and Hassan deserves to be published, and I think Hassan deserves to see the light of day. This question would be directed to Dikthi. I feel like the Northeast is underrepresented in the context of publishing in the whole of India. Is it because of the fact that less authors are there who are sending in manuscripts, or is it because of the level of writing as well? How do you feel?
I don't think it's the level of writing at all. I think it's a combination of things where it sounds like, and I don't know enough, but I feel like the urgency was, it seemed to me in the beginning to convert all your oral folk tales into writing. It seems like I think people were really interested in focusing on that. And maybe that's a process that every culture goes through. I also do think that there is this opaqueness with publishing, so I think people who are writing just don't feel like, it just feels so distant and like so impossible almost to reach a publishing house in Delhi. Like as I mentioned earlier, I didn't know I could work in a publishing house just being in Bangalore, and in Bangalore, like this big city, So I think it's just that, and I think the more exposure there is, and the more writing, like, you already have so many books now from the Northeast, the more people will be more confident and less shy about just approaching people and taking chances and making it happen for themselves. And not feel like, either writing and not publishing at all, or just maybe just saying, okay, I think I'll just do a small print run, self-publishing. You should be bold about your writing, and it is, you will have criticism, but that's okay. And it's important to have your stories heard all over, as far as possible, and as wide-reaching. So I think it's just important, it's just a matter of people just taking a chance.
Are there any particular indigenous communities from the whole of India, not particularly the Northeast, that is doing really well in the publishing industry?
Sorry?
Any particular indigenous community, not necessarily from the Northeast, but from the whole of India that's doing very well in the publishing industry?
I think that there is like so much marginalization. For a long time it was women's voices that were being marginalized, there's Dalit voices marginalized. We're so happy at Penguin. Today there's a book that's been translated, short story collection, translated from Kannada. That's just won the International Booker Prize. It's huge, and this woman is 77. She's an activist. She was, people were threatening to kill her and all of that because she writes about the real lives of Muslim women. And her stories are about the lives of Muslim girls and women in just like the everyday lives in South India. And she just found this really good translator who sort of sifted through all the stories and decided which one should be in this collection. She found an agent, Kanishka, who's one of the biggest agents in India right now. And she found an editor who believed in the book. And those are things that happen. But there is so much marginalization. I think for the longest time, even the South was marginalized, right? Because the main voices were your Bombay and Delhi and Bengali. And I think it's opening up. Now we want to hear voices. I think there's readership for it, and I think publishing houses also realize that there are many, many more voices to be heard and represented.
Let's pass on the question to her. We'll expand a bit further on your silent rebellion. In your poem, By the River Fell Theshel's Hair, you have used memory, but you have also added your own silent rebellion to it. Would you like to talk about that a bit more?
By the Hair Falls Theshel's Hair is actually a short story from my community. It's a love story between Theshel, who is a girl, and Moshe. So just to give an idea to those who might not be familiar with the story, it's about a girl, Tesha, who was taken away by a Burmese man as debt settlement. Like when she was a kid, her parents borrowed some grain from this Burmese man, and due to compounded interest, they could not repay him. So she was taken away as a debt settlement, and Moshel, they were actually engaged. So Moshel runs after her to try to claim her back, but by the time Moshel reached the Chindwin River, which is usually considered the border between the Uipo Bondam, which is the land of the Uipo Mai people, and the Burma. So by the time Moshel reaches Chindwin River, Tesha has already crossed the river, and so it's a tragic love story. But the poem that I write is actually not a retelling of the story. As a contemporary writer, of course, folklores and folktales are goldmine. We go back to get inspiration, ideas, but at the same time, as a contemporary writer, as I've said before, emotion is universal and timeless. So I do resonate with the emotion, and I did not actually think much about this poem, this story growing up. I heard it often, but we actually even have a documentary, short film about this. You can find it on YouTube. It's Tesha and Moshe. I watched it. Still, I was not getting the feel of it really. Then last year, I think it was the beginning of this year, my aunt, she pinged me up on WhatsApp, and she sent me the lyrical script. For my community, Uipo community, we are a very musical and lyrical community. For every event in any point of time, if we consider something to be significant, we have a song for it. Suppose if my mom cooks me a very good meal and I love it so much, then I will give it a song. Yes. So we have a song for emotion and diction as well. So I was reading the script. She asked me to roughly translate it into English for for a program. I was reading it, and there were two lines that particularly caught my attention. Roughly translating it, it's also there in my poem. Those two lines were, "Could I even say you are mine? Could I even tell I am yours?" So when I read that in my language, something broke in me. There was desperation, there was heartbreak, there was helplessness because she was already gone. That broke in me, and I could not bottle the emotion in myself. I had taken part in it, and I had to share it. I could not keep it within myself. I was restless, literally, after reading that. So I had to sit down, and I wrote it down. But still, the poem was not a retelling of the story. It was an expression of the emotion that it left in me. And actually, in fact, in the poem itself, I did some expansion. There were elements that were not told in the folklores that I layered in. For example, there were some certain lines where I talked about the reed's bow, but no longer speaks. The wind moves, but did not bring Tesha back, or something like that. I'm very bad at memorizing my own stuff. So there were layers of emotions that I added on the story from the perspective of the 21st century girl, because I resonated with the emotion, and the poem in itself is actually to question. It's not about what happened, because we already know what happened. It's about who suffered at the end of the story, who felt the emotion, who felt the pain, who suffered, who paid the cost. So it is not only about accepting what has happened, it is about rebelling against why did we accept it. I was putting myself in the position of Moshe or Tesha at the same time, and if it were to happen to me, I would have raised hell. I would have refused to be taken away. I would have asked everybody to stop me. I would have questioned the society. Why does have to happen? And the poem that I wrote is a question to why that had to happen, and to reflect on who paid the price and who suffered at the end.
Yeah, I feel like that resonates with separation of women, collective memory. All of us, we have memories, we have versions, narratives, and it's like nobody questions it. But you have the courage to question that. You have the courage to create something out of it. I think that's really beautiful. Thank you.
Also, with regards to that, we talk about collective memory, repression of women, and all that. So this narratives from the past that have led up to now. So what do we do to create narratives for the future that helps us in getting rid of the narrative of all that's come from the past, all the generational trauma that we carry?
Alright. As a contemporary writer, we hear stories from the past, we take inspiration from them, but the most important thing is that we participate in it. We don't just listen, we don't just let it be, we participate, we question, we respond, and mingle that. Add a little bit of imagination to that, and we can, as writer, remix the story, expand it, express it in a way that is more relevant to us. Yeah, that's about it. Just participate in it and be more active in the storytelling.
I think by sort of writing about what's going on around you, like for instance, we are here in Manipur, so I would love to read books about written by people from the state about the stuff that's going on over the years. Sort of true lived voices, So that would be nice to have. And the other thing is, you asked deeply about publishing authors from the Northeast. I think one of the things also is about, I was just telling somebody the other day, I think it was far easier for me to get published all those years back, I think it's much more difficult now. Because, I don't know, I might be wrong, but I think, again, it comes down to, I think publishing houses themselves are struggling a bit with, people aren't reading, that's one thing, and then I think the marketing factor comes into it too. So, I've had books turned down, because I think I was going to stuff about the Northeast that personally interested me about history and things like that. And so yeah, that's the factor too. So I think it's still difficult, unless you sort of go out there and self-publish your work, but then the thing is, how do you sort of make it heard? And the other thing is, I think at the same time, there's so much more technology to help you with doing stuff, and things like Reels, which I have a son who's 12. When I look at them, I think all of the entertainment, the information, everything they get is from the Reels, which is also sort of, I can't make one, I don't think I will be able to. But I think it's a great opportunity for people to sort of, to tell your own story in that way, as a sort of, to reach out to more people than a book would, I think.
Anything you'd like to add to that, Dipti?
To his point about publishing houses, I think that publishing houses are doing well. I think maybe the larger ones are probably not taking as many chances as they should have. Yeah, that's the thing. And so you might have to look to small publishing houses to do that, when he first got published, there were very few publishing houses. There was Rupert's, it was really small, and now there's so many. So I do feel like there is an opportunity. It's just about finding your right editor and a right space for it. I agree.
At the same time, I also feel back then there were more novels from the Northeast, I think so. One would have expected more and more books to have come out by now.
I think the thing is that there are so many people writing right now. We get so many submissions, and maybe there was maybe a few more books coming from there, and not so much from anywhere else. I think, but I don't get that many submissions from the Northeast anymore. So I don't know.
Let's raise a question to Subi. In documenting folk tales and in creating your work, it is a sensitive subject, right? So how hard is it? what struggles do you go through, what challenges do you go through trying to balance those two?
So my book is exactly not a folktale book because I don't want to take the responsibility of carrying this moral responsibility of getting it right. So what I did cleverly was took something like, for example, in my book, Tales from the Dawnlit Mountains, the first story is about a man who turns into a tiger. So we have this myth, I believe it's somewhere in Nagaland also, such myths that man turning into tiger, spirit tiger. Because recently I read Esther Kire's book also about spirit nights. They also have different versions of that. So we also have different versions of it. And in our community, especially my community is Tani, we have other community like Adi, Galo, Tagin, which all encompass under a bigger clan, which is Tani clan, because we all believe that we are the sons and daughters of Abu Tani. We believe that. So in our culture, we have this certain myths like, and it differs from village to village. Like Nishi community of Papumpare district, they believe that there was a man who could turn into a tiger at night, and if he go hunting, in the morning he will have like scratches in his back because he got into the jungle. And in our village again there was a myth, different one, that there was a man who was so powerful and he was a tiger and he will because we didn't have a road, we didn't have transportation in those old days, he used to go to Tejpur and buy like dozens of cows and come back in the same night. Because people used to walk to Tejpur, which was the nearest, business place for our community in East Kamen. So there are different kind of stories like that. So what I did was took a bit of the myth of man turning into tiger at night and terrorizing the village. I took a bit of that and tried to, create a story around that myth. So, because, like you said, folktale has a sense of responsibility. You have to get it correct, you have to record it nicely, and some, like my community, we are spread across 7 districts in Arunachal Pradesh. So each one have a little variation in how the stories are retold. So maybe in the future I'll try to write, but I don't think so I'll ever take that responsibility. But yeah, I find the folkloric things nice, and I would love to, play around it, like mix and match, and try to narrate new creative stories based on those folklore rather than, write folktale. Because it's like too much researching, and then we don't have like written records. So most of the people who knew the story, they are almost dying or dead.
I actually want to ask Tipsy one question. This is with relation to how Subi has fictionalized her own versions of the folktales that she grew up listening to. Do you think this borders with magical realism? And do you think this is something that indigenous communities can look towards, like moving not directly from recording folktales, myths and legends to fiction, but more towards fictionalizing them and then moving on from there?
I mean, for sure, I think like this magic realism is a term that was a thing, but we've had that for, like, from our myths and from the epics for years, so I mean, for eons. So, no, certainly that is like one thing to do is, and I think that's a really interesting take, is to take a folktale and, sort of retell it in a particular way. But again, I think it's also important to write about your own lives as well, and I think that's what she's doing, is to draw like what's happening now and put that into the folktale. But I think that is, it's a really innovative way to look at things. But it's great to also just write like a straightforward story.
Hermione is one of the most widely read Indian author followers. Readers. Okay, so we have a lot of students actually in our audience as well. They have interest in writing, but they don't have platforms for publication. Like we can go to the traditional way, or our new option is the digital way. Will you like to give some guidelines to the students?
Sure. I'm audible. Write. That is what I want to say. Keep writing. Don't be afraid of writing. Don't be scared of putting your emotions down. But at the same time, talk about traditional publishing or digital publishing. I started as a digital writer. I am still a digital writer. I write on a digital platform, so you can write. You can start a writing on Wattpad. It is a very good platform. It's a great global platform, and they do have opportunities. They have paid opportunities as well. And sometimes if your writing grabs the attention of the editorial team, then you do have the chances to get it adapted into movies as well, comic books as well. So there is the opportunity, but at the same time, if you are there as a budding writer, if you're starting out there, because it is like social media, it is like putting your work out on Instagram. Everybody gets to read it, everybody gets to critique on it. So if you can give it a try, but you have to be mentally prepared to brace what comes your way. If you can afford to be a little reckless and careless, if you can afford to be a little braver, then you can take up the platform. It's good. It's a great start, but it doesn't mean that you stick to it. You can always explore other platforms as well. It is a great way to start sharing. And what was that? Yeah. Just don't be afraid of writing. You can take it slow. On Wattpad, you can write whatever you want. There is spaces for novels, poetry, short story, fiction, non-fiction, and you can even write literally anything. It's just the way you present it. So don't be afraid of it. Just be mentally prepared. Just be a little brave. Yeah, you just have to armor up and go ahead. That's all.
No, just to follow from what what we were just talking about is that that's amazing that you have many followers, and I think that is really a great platform. And actually, when he started talking about doing reels, I didn't think he was going to say just to tell a story through a reel. I thought he was going to say to build a platform, because that really helps budding writers. It's finally, as we discussed earlier, the publisher needs to sell books, right? And so does the author. And marketing becomes then crucial. And you have like this amazing platform like social media, and it's this great equalizer in a way, right? Because anyone can access it, and it just requires, I wouldn't be able to do it, but I'm sure if you really worked at it, and there are tricks that you can use to build a following, and that way your books will reach a wider audience, and that really just helps when you're placing your book with a publishing house.
One thing I'd like to add is that Wattpad is a platform where everybody writer meets. So you don't have to be scared of if your writing is perfect or not. You just have to write, and you can create a community where you can have better readers, give constructive criticisms for one another. So it's a great start. And the most important thing that I usually tell my friends and followers on Wattpad is, if you're writing on Wattpad especially, you have all the chances to correct, edit, do whatever you want, get perspectives and ideas and inputs from other readers and writers as well. So you just have to be a little more gutsy, and at the same time we just have to be a bit more broad-minded, be open to criticisms as well. Not to the point that you demotivate yourself, but to the point that you have to see it in a way that you have to take it as something that is really trying to help you improve on your craft.
I think we have two generations of writers here. The younger generation is represented by Hermione and I think the older Hermione and Sylvie, and I think the older generation is Ankush. So Ankush, you published your first novel back in 2007. So back then, were you writing longhand, and how have you adapted?
Yeah, actually, I did start writing. I mean, I started out writing longhand, and I mean, when I was in college, the first, I think the first story of mine that got published was in this magazine called The Northeast Sun, which existed a long time back, this long thing, and then I had even been to the office in Delhi. It was in Bahadur Shah Zafar Marg, ITO. So I had the handwritten stories back then, and then I've used the typewriter too. I remember getting onto the laptop. So yeah, so that's why I mean, so there might come a time where you don't need to type out the words, but you just so yeah. I mean, there was a time when there were no books, so I don't see any reason why they should be around forever. Could well be replaced by something else. Just sort of thinking aloud.
You think the process and the medium through which you create your work affects the quality of your work? Do you think like the romantic idea of a writer sitting down on a typewriter and thumping out the words has, leads to more creativity, or is it the same? How do you feel? Because you've experienced all of that.
Yeah, that is the whole sort of romantic idea, which I sort of looked up to, and I think I've tried to follow, being on your own, and it's difficult, just create stresses in your own life. And the thing is, we're writing in English, which I think leads to, I think they'll take another whole discussion, but that sort of leads to things which, the more you experience life and, the more you know about yourself and your past history, the things which come out, and so it's difficult. I mean, basically, you're not at the same place where you started, where you could just sit down and write. Things take on a much more deeper significance. So.
Thank you. Any word from Subi? No, on the writing process, did you ever go through a phase in your writing career where you were writing longhand and then you went to shorthand and all of that, and how the process has changed your style of writing?
So in my writing, I start usually with my hand because I just want the first rough sketch of the story. I let it, if I want to write something, I think about it whenever I can, how the story should start, and I take so much time in figuring out what will be the voice, and how the voice will sound like. Like in my story, A Night with the Tiger, I tried writing it in first-person voice. I also tried it writing in second person, and eventually I decided to go in the first person. And I started with my hand, and once I got the flow of the story, then I started typing it. Same with the Headhunter story, because I wrote that story first in second person point of view, not the third person point of view, but then I just felt that the voice was much stronger in the first person point of view. So for me, before writing a story, to get that voice and to figure out which is the perfect voice for that story is very important, and it can take some weeks, months also. And once I find the right voice and the right way of starting the story, then everything follows, and I end up typing it on computer and printing out the first draft, seeing it, noticing lots of mistakes, and then again editing it, and then printing out the second draft. I do it that way until I find a final draft which feels good enough to show to other people, like my sister, whom I have to beg to read my story.
Talking about drafts and its mistakes, Timothy, how tedious it is to edit a book, and how many rounds do you go through, and do you do it on a physical manuscript, or do you do it on screen?
Now on the screen, but usually, most
decide to take them on because they've gone through a certain process. That's what one should do is like a writer, like a deputy writer, just go through your manuscript a couple of times. Don't just send like a first draft out. It should have anyway been looked at very closely by the writer a couple of times. And if it's gone through an agent, the agent has also looked at it. So it comes to us in pretty decent shape. It's not as if we're changing chunks of it. Sometimes that happens. And that can be like quite an intensive process. But it's done for a particular reason because you think that there is potential there or the writer is, that it's going to end up in sales, etc. So it takes time, it differs. When a writer asks me how long will the editing take, I always say I have to see the manuscript before I can tell you because I have no idea. It could take like 2 weeks or like a month, 2 months. Yeah. But luckily now it's done online with track changes. Yeah.
21st century writers, we're talking about modern style of writing, postmodernism, you have freestyle, you have freedom of thought, freedom of expression. Can we, do you think that is actually, that binds you, or that actually really gives you more freedom? Because the more voice you have, there are more opinions, more perspectives. So you can comment on your style of writing. Do you think there is more freedom for you, or do you think there is more constraint?
You are sharing the panel with the most impulsive writer in the world.
I write on the go. Is it because of what time?
Yeah. So those oohs and ahs are also usually used on Wattpad. So you have that freedom. For me personally, starting off on Wattpad is good because there are so many people like me. I don't have to be so scared that I might get it wrong because we all have that experience. We share that experience. I believe it is for every writer. Like you once mentioned, how did I come across that phase where we're cringing? I still haven't come across that. I still haven't moved past that. I am still cringing to this day, but that's all right. It happens. We always have time to fix and change and edit. As a 21st century girl, I think it is good to write to this day. I don't feel the restraint. I feel free enough. I feel the freedom of writing what I want and what I love. And as for me, I don't personally, I don't write something that I don't love. Something that I don't feel. It might come across very imperfect to you, very cringy, very cheesy, but if I do love it, I write it, that's all.
It's a difficult question to answer. I can answer it like it's good or it's bad also, but I think I'll just say my point of view. I think when I write, I don't think about moral responsibilities much, or I don't constrict myself on trying to follow certain kind of style. I just write whatever I feel like, but I am also a reader. Before a writer, I'm also a reader, but I try to write a story which is, to write something which is different. I try not to make it very generic. And I want to write something which has not been discussed, or maybe something which is already there but written in a new style or new point of view. So that's my attempt as a writer. And since there are a lot of writers all across India, all over the world, and there are so many good writers, but for your book to stand out, you have to either have a very good story or you have to write a book with great literary value. So these two things are always in my mind what kind of writer you want to be? That's also one question every writer should ask herself or himself. So I want to become a writer who at least attempts or succeeds in contributing some kind of literary value for my community, for my state, as well as my country. That will be my, that will always be my intention as a writer. And like Dipti has also said that today Indian woman has won an International Booker Prize. Very happy about it, and I'm cheering, and very happy that writers from marginalized section also winning. And then moreover, that's a short story collection. Yes, that's why it's, so it's really encouraging for short story, because my book is also a short story. So that's my intention as a writer.
Earlier we had a session on why publishing matters with Dipti. Now I would like to ask Ankush, because he's also an expert in this field, and he's also written a lot about contemporary fiction, why writing matters and why writing contemporary fiction matters for that matter.
I think I've just said what I needed to on that. But yeah, it matters because there's still a lot of stories out there waiting to be told, and a lot of different voices and perspectives, and especially the non-literary perspectives, like I said, I think there's a lot of that to be written, especially from the Northeast. So we are still waiting to read those books. Definitely, some of you go on to write something like that.
Okay, now I would like to open the floor to the audience. Like, if any one of you have any questions, I think the panelists will be happy to take on to answer your questions.
So I have a question in 3 parts. The first question is for the authors. I understand when you use a situation that actually happened, or even names of people who were involved in this situation as a source of inspiration to write your story, which might be fiction after that. But have you ever gone through and experienced an ethical dilemma when you actually knew about an incident that happened involving other people and maybe names of people in situations, and then you wrote it down and passed it off as fiction? So that is my first question. My second question is to...
I'll answer that straight away. It's not a dilemma in any way. I think that's what writers look for.
Yeah, but isn't that an ethical, sort of a thing that, how can you read somebody's story when it is theirs?
I mean, writers exist to steal stories,
Okay. And my second question is to Dipti, actually. So in Penguin, is it like when you all are accepting scripts, do you have like a list of ethical considerations that you send across to your authors before you actually pass it off?
No, if we do sign on a book, then we do have, it depends, some non-fiction books have to have a legal read. That's what she says, you have to be so careful, because anybody will file a case. Like, that line has offended them, they file a case in India. There's a lot of cases going on that nobody really knows about. So that goes to a legal read. We do have, like, if it were, a particular kind of book, then we have a sensitivity read, because, the editor may not be conversant with what might be offensive to some people, so you do have nowadays you have a sensitivity read, but that's only when the book has been signed on.
Thank you. But of course, the first question was more about that point of conscience. Whenever we're telling somebody else's story, do we have the right to tell their story without asking their permission?
So all writing,
actually,
it's like telling, and I think because they're saying it's from their perspective, it's sort of their version, as you said, there are many truths, and that's their version of that.
And of course, my third question is actually specifically for Kush Saikia. Are you tired of people from Shillong asking you why Nongrim Hills and who is this girl from Nongrim Hills?
Well, if you read the book, actually, I'm still surprised. That book was written more than 10 years ago. It's still around. My main thing was to, if you read the book, I'll be giving away stuff here, but okay, it's not really about the title as so much about the city itself, sort of the non-touristy side of the city, which is already fast disappearing. The Tibetan, those cabin restaurants where we started drinking, those places, and so again, like Jet City Woman was about this guy from the. So he's like a character who hasn't been out of the Northeast. So he's in Shillong. He plays in a band, a small-time musician, struggling to make ends meet. And then his brother gets into a sort of mess. And but then looking at the book many years later, I feel that there are parallels to any sort of elder and younger brother relationship. Me and my younger brother, or look at my father and his elder brother. So there's always that element of trying to help the weaker one out of a, fix he's gotten into. So I think maybe that resonates. But the title, those who stayed in Nongre Mills were like I think they liked the book, So I think there were a lot of titles with the girl, this girl, and I thought, why not make it again, going back to what I said in the first answer, it was basically about using something from your own backyard, instead of looking to wider horizons in a way.
Before the girl with the driving tattoo or after?
You ask.
Nice to be on this side of the stage. So my question is more, out of curiosity. What are you working on? I mean, what can we expect in the coming months, weeks, maybe? Like, what are the projects you're working on? It's a general question for anyone. Like, something maybe you want to hype up your next release.
Alright, let me spill all the beans then. I'm looking forward to, I write contemporary romance mainly, but I don't want to limit myself to that, so I am also I'm also trying my bit in writing a fantasy novel, which inspired by some, not exactly folklores, but the way of life that they had in the past. So yeah, maybe sometime in the future, we would all be lucky enough to get to read that in paperback.
I'm writing something since last year, on and off. It's a horror series where there is this girl who has mixed blood of a shaman and someone like a demigod, and I'm trying to explore different folklore of ghosts based in different districts of Arunachal, and trying to combine all those and putting that girl in every situation, trying to fight, different kinds of ghosts from different communities. That's something that I'm working on.
We call the girl from East coming. No, there's a graphic novel, so like I said, let's see when it comes out, if it does. But apart from that, there's something I've worked on and I've sent it out to some publishers. I'm not very hopeful, to be honest, because it's something, I don't know, my interests seem to be leading me further and further down. Maybe it's more academic. So it deals with sort of untold stories and histories from the Northeast. So they're all in segments, but they're linked with each other, and it starts off with a boy in Shillong and then goes off to different stories. Like there's a tea planter, Scottish tea planter who comes to Assam, and then there's a volunteer teacher who goes into Nepal in the 1950s. And what else? It's about a Bengali intelligence officer who's working in the Northeast, and then who has sort of his romantic involvements, and so the effect it has on his daughter. I think it's sort of unclassifiable, which is why I think publishing houses wouldn't really be interested. But let's see. I mean, the last option is always to publish it myself.
session would be for us to start writing, because that's the only way we can move forwards, and I hope everyone here does that. Thank you. Thank you all.